Hey everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart webcast. Recently, I created some video comments for our show here, as well as some audio stuff, and I've been on some programs talking about the shooting in Minnesota that involved an ICE officer and a young woman named Renee Good. And normally I do not respond to the commentary that people add when they read an article or they see one of my shows and they jump on there and they because there's varied opinions about law enforcement. It is it's a topic that is at the essence of a lot of people's life and anger, and they don't like interaction with law enforcement. They don't like what they do. And then other people are very supportive of law enforcement and understand the mission and why law enforcement is out there. So when I made these recent comments about my perception of what happened in the interaction between the ICE officer and Renee Good, where very tragically and unfortunately she lost her life, I looked at it from the point of view of my life experience as a law enforcement officer, as well as my training, and as my experience as an internal affairs officer, looking at the actions of other officers. And while I don't normally respond to the comments because they can be varied, and I'm just giving my opinion, or I'm offering advice, or I'm offering some insight based on my training and experience. 90% of the comments that I received were reinforcing of my review of the situation. While people believe pretty much across the board that this is a tragic situation and it's horrible that this woman lost her life, I'm going to say 90% of the people that have responded understand what happened and why it happened. Personally, anytime someone loses their life, I find it to be a terrible, horrible situation for them and for the people involved. In this case, the officer who had to take someone's life. And the other 10% of the comments, though, they vary widely. You get people who are really unhinged. They come on screaming and hollering, the cops are bad, telling me I'm a liar. I don't have the experience that I said I had, And that's why I don't normally comment, because people can be pretty much out of their minds when it comes to anything to do with what's going on in the world today, and especially when it relates to law enforcement. So that's why I usually don't respond. A couple of the comments, though, I found to be extremely reasonable and got me to thinking, right? Got me to thinking about the situation and their point of view. And I think one of the comment that got me to decide to do this is that somebody came on and said, I disagree with your review of the situation. And I said, okay, that's fair. And then I had to go back and think, what is it that I gave in that review? I tried to look at the evidence that I had at hand, the video that I have at hand, the witnesses that I have at hand. I wasn't there. I wasn't in Minnesota at the time. I wasn't on the ground. I can only look at the same evidence we're all looking at. And what I saw was, based on my training and experience, I saw that interaction, how it unfolded. I know the law, and I understand how it's gone in the past. I've been that cop that had to make a split-second decision of whether or not to escalate the situation to deadly force. And I am lucky and blessed that in my career, I never had to take anyone's life. I came close a couple of times. And I've reflected on those times many, many, many times after it happened, immediately after it happened, and to this very day. I reflect on them, and I think how grateful I am that I didn't have to use deadly force where I would have been justified. Would have been justified, no doubt about it. But it still would have been a terrible tragedy for me and the person. So I'm trying to bring all that together when I answer people's commentaries and understand. And because this person was so reasonable, simply stating they disagree with my review. Now, I happen to know this person has no law enforcement experience, has never been out in the street making an arrest, has never been out having someone resisting, had never had someone try and drive a car at them. I took that into account because you have to take all things into account. And I think it led me to offer this as a follow-up to my commentary earlier. No matter how you feel about this situation, we have to understand, is it the situation itself that we're upset about? Or for many people, especially the people who disagree with what happened and see it as something other than a tragic incident resulting from the actions of Miss Good. They see the officer as completely wrong, unjustified, shouldn't have done it. We've gone over this, you know. If you think that ICE should not be there removing illegal aliens, criminal and otherwise, people who came here illegally, then no matter what happens, you're going to see it as wrong, that they shouldn't be there. So therefore, because the premise of them being there is wrong, everything that flows from them being there is wrong. I think that's the one point of view. The other side is you don't want to just take a knee-jerk reaction to say whatever the cops do is right, right? And that's where my background is an internal affairs investigator and criminal investigator comes in, because we have to look at the totality of the circumstance and figure out, because you know what? People make mistakes. They do things wrong purposely and accidentally. So when I looked at it, that's the opinion I tried to give. Looking at the comments of this person who said, I disagree, here's what I've tried to identify. Whether you agree with the officer's actions or not, there is some reality we have to deal with. Number one, ICE is a legitimate federal law enforcement agency. They have a responsibility to enforce immigration law. They have a responsibility to take people into custody who have broken the law or are a danger to the community. There's no option here for them. Now, if you don't like them flooding into a city and stopping cars and finding people at work and arresting them, that is the fault of the local governments who refuse to cooperate with the ICE agency. And to say, okay, we've arrested this person for burglary, we're going to release them, and you have a detainer, and turn them over. They're refusing to do that. Therefore, ICE cannot enforce its mission. So it had to go to the city to do that, right? So we can't get away from that. That's the reality. That's why they're there, right? If the cities and states would simply cooperate and do what they've done always, the federal agencies and local agencies always work together. When somebody's wanted on a federal charge and you have them on a local charge, when you're done with them in your system, you turn them over, especially if there's a detainer or a warrant. You call them, hey, we have this person, we're going to release them. And they come and pick them up. Well, in many of these states, they disagree with the mission of ICE. They are, the political leaders in these communities are calling for violence against ICE, which is a problem in itself that needs to be addressed. But the reality is that's how I see these two camps. Either you believe ICE is illegitimate in their mission, and therefore anything that happens as an interaction with our citizens is wrong. Therefore, it makes the shooting wrong and criminal, as a matter of fact. So here's trying to break this down for all of us. At some point, already begun, but at some point in the future, there's going to be a determination made by people who have been charged with investigating this incident. These people are professional. We hope that they do everything fairly. We hope that they do everything with a cool eye to the facts and not with the emotion that's involved in this situation, and that they adjudicate the actions of the officer appropriately. Now, that can go one of two ways. They're going to compare the law. They're going to compare agency policy. And then they're going to compare the facts of the incident. And then they're going to try and overlay that on the law and policy to see if the officer acted correctly. If they find he acted within the law and within policy, the officer will be exonerated. They will find that his actions, though tragic, were appropriate and legal. And that will be the end of that. If they find that the officer acted illegally, if he acted outside of policy, if he acted inappropriately in any way, they will find that. And then the officer will be held to account for his actions, which could range from a lot of things. He could be suspended. He could be demoted. He could be fired. Ultimately, he can be held responsible, criminally responsible, for the death of Ms. Good. That's how our system is set up. So just because you disagree with what's going on, you need to ask yourself, why do I disagree? The facts are right in front of me. I see the video with my own eyes. I might not like how it came out, but that doesn't change the law and the expectations we have of citizens and law enforcement officers. So when I look at this situation, again, I have to reiterate, I find it terribly tragic that this woman lost her life, regardless of what she was engaged in. Protesting. Or protesting is a fundamental right of ours for each and every one of us as American citizens. And I think it should be protected. And we should honor the fact that we have that right. But because we have that right to protest does not mean we have the right to interfere with legitimate law enforcement action. No matter how much you feel strongly about your belief, you don't have a right to interfere with law enforcement officers conducting legitimate law enforcement actions. If you do not like the laws that surround immigration, then you go to your politicians and you vote for people who are going to change the law to what you like. And then the laws change, and then the police mission will change. What we have is this determination will be made. And if it goes in the officer's favor, that'll be the end of that. Then he just has to deal with the fact that he took someone's life, which is difficult for many people. Nobody wants to do it. I told you about my case when I didn't have to do it, and I still think about it to this day. If he's found criminally responsible, then he will have to deal with those consequences. That's how the system goes. But when we look back over this again, comparing the law, comparing the situation, what the courts have done many, many times is they have the reasonable officer standard, meaning not just something out of the blue, but how would a reasonable officer who's out there doing the job respond to the situation? The use of force is built on a continuum, right? There's a continuum of the use of force. It starts out with verbal. I give you verbal commands. Step out of the car. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands on the car. Whatever it is, take your hands out of your pocket. That's a verbal command. I have every right legally to issue those commands. You, as a citizen, just like me, when I get pulled over by an officer, I have to follow legal commands by an officer. We are responsible to comply with legal commands of an officer. Now, if the officer tells you to do something and you refuse to do it, the officer can put hands on you. All these people screaming, don't touch me, when they're trying to take him into custody is absurd, because that's the next step, right? We go into physical. Now I can physically lay hands on you to take you in custody. I can spray you with pepper to take you into custody. I can handcuff you to take you into custody. The next level up is I can use equipment. People use batons. They use all kinds of other devices, less than lethal, to take you into custody, to take control of you. You don't have a right to resist, even if you don't like the fact you're being arrested, even if you don't like what the officer's doing, even if the officer's rude, or if you disagree with the officer's judgment. You don't have any right to resist. You are to comply. You fight this in court. You go to court and you fight. You say the officer was wrong, and you make your case. Beyond using implements, the next step in the continuum is the use of deadly force. Now, when we're talking about this, the average person in their life does not deal with the use of deadly force on a daily basis like our law enforcement community does. We carry guns, we carry weapons, we have rifles in our car. What's the purpose of those things? They're not just rogue individuals, they're trained, because you know what? The people we interact with are committing crimes. They are hurting people. And we as a society have decided we want to live a chaos-free, safe life. Understanding human nature, we know that there are people that will take advantage of someone if they can. They will hurt you, rob you, rape you, murder you. So therefore, we all as citizens have agreed that we want laws to be in place to protect us from people who would harm us. So our legislature creates laws that we want and implements them. Well, then they have to be enforced, because if you don't enforce a law, it does no good. So we've created law enforcement agencies to go out and enforce the law. If we don't like a law, we go to our legislature and have them change the law, right? But this is what we've done. The officers are out there, not on their own. They're out there because you and I want them out there. Right? We don't always like how they interact with us, and we don't always agree what they're doing, but that's why they're out there. So when I look at the facts of the case, and again, I'm going to go over this very quickly again. All of this is a terrible tragedy, and a loss of life always is. This young woman made a lot of choices. See, we have to look at what the officer did. Did he act within the color of law, within the boundary of law and agency policy? Did he use tools that he was legitimately given to do his work? No matter how tragic that is, it happens all the time. Officers get shot and killed all the time. It's tragic. It's part of the job and the nature of the mission of law enforcement. So we have to look at what he did, and we have to judge what he did from a distance and make a determination if we think he acted appropriately within the law, within policy, and within the scenario that he was faced with. Well, we also have to look at Miss Good and her actions. So we can think that she's legitimately protesting. And like I said, protesting is a legitimate thing to do. But you're not allowed to impede law enforcement officers from doing their job. You're not allowed to block them with your car. You're not allowed to disregard lawful orders that you're given just because you feel strongly about a topic. And in this case, when we watch the video, we see Ms. Good blocking the road with her vehicle. First mistake. Then we see the officers tell her, get out of the car, a legitimate order by a law enforcement officer. And this is where the cascading goes and where the story starts to change with who's right and wrong until the ultimate moment when the officer's gun is fired. So Ms. Good decided to block traffic to make her point of view known. It's appropriate to protest. It's not appropriate to block traffic. When an officer tells you to get out of the car, your only response is to get out of the car. No matter how you feel about it, you've been given a lawful order, you get out of the car. Ms. Good did not do that. Instead, she put the vehicle in reverse. By putting that vehicle in reverse and backing up when you had officers standing around you, you have now endangered all the officers around you. No matter what you think, well, they weren't in danger, they weren't this and that. You have a moving car, an officer standing there, and apparently the roads were icy, the car could have slid, a million things could have happened. She put the car in reverse. She made a conscious decision not to get out of the car like she was ordered. Then she put the car in drive to go forward. And at that point, there was an officer in front of her. Now, you can argue that tactically he shouldn't have been in front of her. And the video shows us different things. We see him off to the right when she backs up and she turns. Now he's in front of her and she goes forward. She has now jeopardized that officer particularly by going forward because she did not follow a lawful command to get out of the vehicle. So you can disagree that she shouldn't have been taken out of the vehicle. She got a lawful order. She should have gotten out of the vehicle. She should not have gone in reverse and then gone forward towards an officer. The moment she went towards the officer, she now endangered the officers around her and that particular officer who had a split second to make a decision. Could he jump out of the way? Maybe. Maybe he felt he couldn't. I've been in front of a car as it's moving. You feel lots of different things depending on the surroundings, where you are, your footing. There's a million things that go into that split second decision. Then, as she's pulling away, whether she was just fleeing to get out of there, which is a crime, regardless of whether she was fleeing or purposely trying to hit the officer, she did hit the officer. And as we find out now, we're hearing reports that he had a more severe injury than just hitting his hip on a refrigerator. We're hearing that he might have had internal bleeding. Regardless, the car hit him. And if Ms. Good had gotten out of the car when she was ordered to do so, the officer would not have been hit. It was at that moment that she went forward and hit him that he fired the shots that killed her. Now, this is what's going to be judged as the investigation continues. Should he have jumped out of the way? Should that have been his first course? That's going to be judged. Should he have fired the shots? That's going to be judged. Was he justified in firing the shots? All of this is going to be reviewed. But we cannot get away from the fact that none of this would have happened if Ms. Good had done what she was ordered to do. She chose to block the road in protest. Okay, that's blocking the road. You don't get killed for blocking a road. When an officer tells you to move the car or get out of the car, you get out of the car. Right? You do not try to flee, because then you hit an officer and you endanger everyone. And in this case, she endangered herself. And we can agree or disagree with the need for the use of force. The use of force is covered under the law and policy, and it takes into account the officer's interpretation of what was going on at that moment. And that's what these investigators are going to come down to. So you can disagree with how I see this, and I appreciate that. But I'm going to ask everyone to look closely at the situation, not emotionally, not whether you think ICE should have been there or not, whether you like their mission or not. Understand what the law is. Officers have responsibility to follow the law and stay within agency policy. Citizens, we have a responsibility to follow the law and follow lawful orders of law enforcement. When we don't do that, we create a situation that is just begging for added problems and trouble. And in this case, because she refused to follow lawful orders, because she was engaging in illegal activity, it accentuated the situation and moved it forward to the point that she lost her life. Now, like I said, investigators are going to determine if the officer was right or if the officer was wrong, if he was justified in using that force or not. You can talk morally whether he should have done it or shouldn't have done it. The reality is, was it within the law and policy and within his belief that he needed to protect himself by doing that? So I hope everyone out there takes a deep breath and looks at this. As we've all said, it's a tragedy, but there's a lesson for everyone here, right? Follow the law. Keep your emotions in check. Don't put yourself in situations where, because you're violating the law, you're putting yourself in danger, right? Because these things do happen. So we're going to find out soon enough, one way or another, how they adjudicate this situation. And whether they find that the officer was justified or not. And then we have to deal with the consequences either way. But to just say I disagree because I don't like the outcome is not a legitimate point of view, right? You have to look at facts and situations. Take the emotion and tragedy out of it. All right. I want to thank everybody for being here. And remember, like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff that we do here. The Blue Heart webcast. We're here to try and bring the law enforcement experience to life for everyone, and to help training and help our brothers and sisters out there do the job that they're entrusted to do. All right. See you down the road.